There we go. All right, let's look at this. So Maundy, Thursday, but first we're going to begin with our prayer. Again, this is the collect for Palm Sunday, but this is about what we do in Holy Week. It's a prayer for Holy Week. Assist us mercifully with your help, O Lord God of our salvation, that we may enter with joy upon the contemplation of those mighty acts, whereby you have given us life and immortality through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
Okay. Um, so I want to talk just quickly about where we are in Holy Week. Last week we were talking about Palm Sunday, and that begins Holy Week. Um, and so we do though. So you have Holy Monday, Holy Tuesday, Holy Wednesday. These are all the weekdays in Holy Week. Then on Maundy, Thursday, we begin what's called the Paschal Triduum. So Paschal comes from the Greek for Passover, which is what Easter is called in that language, and that's why we have a Paschal candle on at the Great Vigil and all through Easter. It's a candle we light at the new fire. It's lit for Easter through Easter season to Pentecost, and it is also lit for baptisms and for funerals. So those are times when the Paschal candle is used. Triduum is really Latin, and it means 3 days. So it's the three holy days. So it begins on Holy Thursday, which we call Maundy Thursday, um, and then goes Good Friday. And then Holy Saturday, that's not really the third day Easter is, but Holy Saturday is in there and is its own time of commemorating when Jesus is in the tomb. But then the great vigil of Easter, which is celebrated anytime after once you hit sundown on Easter Eve. And that's the great vigil of Easter. It could also be very early in the morning and Easter Sunday. So the Paschal Triduum begins in the evening at the Maundy Thursday liturgy, and it ends at time of evening prayer on Easter Sunday. So that's the Triduum. It's a very fancy word. But it's one that I may say some and I don't even think about it. So I just wanted you to know that lingo. Um, so then in our tradition, Holy Thursday in English became known as Maundy Thursday, and it comes for the Latin mandatum, which means commandment. So think mandate. And that's because in the gospel reading for the Maundy Thursday, the Holy Thursday, which commemorates the Last Supper, does not talk about the Last Supper. It is in John's account where we have a very different account of the dinner, and there Jesus gives a new commandment. I give you a new commandment that you love one another, just as I have loved you. You also should love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another. So it's the day when Maundy Mandatum, Jesus gives us a new commandment. All right. That's not where I want to be right now. Hold on, sorry. Um, so let's have a little discussion first. All right. So foot washing. This painting is a wall fresco by Giotto, which is about the year 1000. This is in the Scrivengi Chapel in Padua, Italy, which is near Venice. And this is not a picture oh, goodness gracious, sorry. This is not a picture I took, but it is I have been to the Scrivenergy Chapel and I've seen all of Giotto's paintings there, which are amazing. We'll see another one next week. But here you see the story of Jesus washing the disciples' feet, which is found in John's gospel account of the Last Supper and is also found in the gospel we read on Maundy Thursday. So foot washing was not always a common practice in the church, but now it is much more common. In fact, more often than not, there's a foot washing. And so I would love to know what you think about it. It can be somewhat controversial for folks, I know. Have you had your feet washed? Have you vowed never to have your feet washed? I would love to know what you have to say. Oh, goodness.
I've had my feet washed once by you in Fort Lauderdale, and that's the only time I've ever done it.
Mhm. Sorry, Pat says I'm freezing on and off, so I apologize if I'm coming in and out. What did you think about it, Janet?
It was okay there. I don't think I would feel comfortable at Ian's church here in Savannah. It's just not something I was brought up with because I was not a cradle Episcopalian.
Well, I'm a cradle Episcopalian and I wasn't brought up with it because it was certainly not a tradition when I was
That's
growing up.
true. That's true.
Alexa.
I've done it a number of times, both here and up in Massachusetts, where my sister's church is, and I find it very meaningful. And I do have to share with you, my sister's pastor stood there. I was only there once for this, and he said, "Now look, if you don't want to have your feet washed, don't worry about it. We can wash. I can wash any part. You can do your elbow. You can." To your wrist. Well, all I wanted to do was laugh when he said that, but I just want you to know that. And I also was a cradle Episcopalian, but never had this at my home church. I think this, when Leslie did this start? Do you remember? You must remember.
It became more common in the late 80s. It's not in the prayer book. It just says if there's to be a foot washing, this is where it takes place. The service is found in the Book of Occasional Services. But I think that was really put there because churches were already doing it. But really, it's probably more 80s that after the new prayer book, the 1979 prayer book.
Well, I'm interested in what Andy has to say, whether you did this over in England growing up. Was this available over there?
No.
Okay.
Short answer.
Is it now? Is it now over there? I mean, do they do it?
I actually have no idea. I don't know.
Something need to find out.
I think the Anglican church in England is a lot like the church Leslie grew up in, which was it was very much a low church, and I think the churches in England are fairly low too. So I doubt they do it there.
It depends on the church.
Right.
And no offense to the Englishmen among us, but it doesn't seem very British to sit there and it just doesn't seem seemly. Anybody else?
I've never had my feet washed.
You haven't? Have you been to the service when it's happening?
Once or twice.
Mm-hmm. What did you think when you saw it?
I think it's fine. Because I see a podiatrist, I feel kind of funny about it.
Well, I think I'll do it this year. How's that, Leslie?
I think that would be very, very good.
I'll let one of the boys wash my feet.
So one of the things that you hear people talk about with the foot washing is that they'd be embarrassed. They don't want you touching their feet, which frankly is how Peter reacted. So it's actually, I think, appropriate that you feel weird about it. It should feel strange. It does feel it's a profoundly different intimacy than, say, getting a pedicure. because like a pedicure, they're doing a service for you, which is where the foot washing, there's the aspect of like this person is touching your feet, and um we have this feeling of like, are my feet okay? Do they look all right? And I admit, because I go barefoot the entire service for Maundy Thursday. One, it's practical because that way when I come to the foot washing, my feet are ready to go and I don't have to take time. But more of it is that it does feel strange to me. I feel like I'm standing on holy ground differently. I'm much more aware of what's under my feet. So that's part of it for me. So a lot of people don't like that it happens right in front of folks. And I understand at St. Matthew's, there's sometimes been a station in the back for people who don't want to be up and in the middle of the action. But you know, my answer when people say my feet might be dirty or they might smell, I'm like, okay, that's why you should have them washed. And it does feel very strange. And the thought of it is off-putting. But that is why we do it. You know, there are lots of things we do because Jesus, and the Eucharist being among them, because Jesus told us to. We don't have any problem because doing what he did. But in this case, it being the foot washing, we do it as an act of something that feels very foreign and out of place and makes us feel vulnerable. That is really part of it. And so I understand completely why people would be feel anxious about it. And I always try to talk about how to, you know, why we would do it. I had a parishioner in my home parish who was an exec at Exxon, and he always wore a suit and very formal. And he said, I will never get my feet washed. And my first Maundy Thursday, I preached and he came up to get his feet washed. And I went, oh, and he said, don't say anything. And every year for the rest of my time, 14 years, he got his feet washed every time. I always make sure the water's really warm. You'll see when I'm doing the foot washing, sometimes it's the priest that does all the feet. Sometimes you pass person to person. So, you know, somebody washes your feet and then you wash the next person's feet. That's a very different feeling too. Like having your priest at your feet is one thing, having somebody else, the thought of getting your feet washed is one thing. The thought of washing somebody else's feet is another. So there are all these different ways to do it, and none of them feel like, okay, we're just doing the ritual the way we always done it. It's always going to feel a little strange. And when I do a foot washing, you will see that I am basically smiling the whole time. It just this act of service, of being with people, of washing the feet. And my sister Lauren, who's the priest, she is foot phobic, I think I've mentioned maybe, and she loathes feet. I can't, like, if I have a pedicure, I can't send her the picture of like how pretty the color is. She just can't. But as a teenager, she was in a really wonderful Episcopal youth program, you know, just a retreat that really opened up kids' lives. And one of the things was that you had the foot washing, and the youth that were in charge washed the feet, which meant Lauren. And we all went, how's Lauren? And that's the one time she will have anything to do with feet. She does, you know, in that time when she's doing it in that context, it has such deep meaning for her that she will do it. And we both learned to kiss the feet, which I found out not long ago. Priests go, you know, I assumed that lots of other people did because that's the way I was taught. And they all went, oh, doesn't bother me at all. So
yeah, well, no, that's going a little too far for me.
I kissed your feet. I know when I wash them because that's what I do. Yeah.
I don't remember
you definitely
that.
had them kissed. So I will say this before we go on, and we're going to talk about kind of the foot washing at the end too, but I just thought it is something that feels very strange. And it is something that is completely, it is optional. It doesn't have to happen. And when you do it, it is important, though, to do it for everybody. Now, like when you see on Maundy Thursday, and especially Pope Francis made such a wonderful witness of the 12 people whose feet he washed, being from marginalized communities, that's really important to him. And in some churches, they just choose 12 people, come up, get your feet washed like the apostles, and move on. But it's most moving when it's offered to everybody. Now, Alexa, I'm not picking on you, but right away, you said there was a priest that said, you don't have to get your foot washed. You can get your hand washed, or you can get your elbow washed. And no, you have to do the feet.
Well, I didn't see
Yeah.
take him up on that, but he was sort of one of those trendy guys.
Yeah. I mean, and I understand that there's a lot of well-meaning people who instead do a hand washing,
Right.
but the point of doing it is these actions. Jesus says, what I've done to you, do for one another.
Right.
And so we specifically do it. But if we try to find ways to make it more palatable for us, we're probably getting away from the purpose, which is to
Mhm.
understand why Peter said, you will never wash my feet. And then Jesus says, unless you're washed, you have no part of me. And then Peter says, my head, my hands, and he says, no, only the feet. And we go, okay. So we'll hear that message in just a minute. So,
Okay.
oh, I lost Pat. She was having some troubles. Have I been freezing up for anybody?
No, there she is.
Hi,
She's back.
Pat.
There
Did
she
you froze? You disappeared.
Yes,
Well, we're glad you're back.
thanks.
All
You
right.
had
Any last?
frozen again.
Oh, your internet? What? I froze again? I think it's your internet, maybe, because I'm not freezing up for others, but I'll try to be very still. That always makes it worse when the
Hey,
person
sorry about
talking.
that, guys.
No, please stay. I'm sorry, I can't fix it, but I want you to stay, please. And there'll also be recordings later. So let's go back to our slideshow, and we will continue on. So back to where we were. All right. So this is the gospel we hear, and it is appointed for Maundy Thursday. Now, before the festival of the Passover, Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart from this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. The devil had already put it into the heart of Judas, son of Simon Iscariot, to betray him. And during supper, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going to God, got up from the table, took off his outer robe, and tied a towel around himself. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel that was tied around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, Lord, are you going to wash my feet? Jesus answered, You do not know what I am doing, but later you will understand. Peter said to him, You will never wash my feet. Jesus answered, Unless I wash you, you have no share with me. Simon Peter said to him, Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head. Then Jesus said to him, One who has bathed does not need to wash except for the feet, but is entirely clean. And you are clean, though not all of you. For he knew who was to betray him. For this reason he said, Not all of you are clean. After he had washed their feet, had put on his robe, and had returned to the table, he said to them, "Do you know what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for that is what I am. So if I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have set you an example that you should do as I have done to you. Very truly, I tell you, servants are not greater than their master, nor are messengers greater than the one who sent them. If you know these things, you are blessed if you do them. Now the Son of Man has been glorified, and God has been glorified in him. If God has been glorified in him, God will also glorify in himself and will glorify him at once. Little children, I am with you only a little longer. You will look for me. And as I said to the Jews, so now I say to you, where I am going, you cannot come. I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also should love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. So, the one thing notably missing from John's account of the Last Supper is the bread, the wine, the body, the blood. That doesn't appear in there at all. And instead, we have this part with foot washing and the new commandment. And it would seem like, wouldn't you use one of the other gospels that has the account of the actual supper instead of John, which now, after this portion, has chapters of prayers? In fact, I wrote a prayer in a paper in seminary. We had to write a paper on John chapter 17, which is called the high priestly prayer. And it's this prayer that Jesus says over all the disciples. And I finished the paper and I went, I never, ever, ever, ever want to have to deal with this again, because it doesn't have the narrative of it, but it does have what Jesus was communicating to them that night, which is that he was not going to always be with them. And here are ways to know that he's there. In the other gospels, he says, "This is my body, this is my blood." Here he kneels at their feet and washes their feet and says, "What I have done to you, you do to others." And in this case, it means to be a servant or a slave, because this, you and I, the one difference with this is foot washing is not a regular part of our lives. It's just isn't. But when you lived in ancient times in a country that was very, you had dirt walks at best, and your feet got dirty, and you wore sandals, and so the slaves, when you first got in, would wash your feet, and instead Jesus did it. So it's witnessing to the complete turning around of the role of teacher and disciple, of Lord, and of the faithful. Any thoughts?
So we have to have our feet washed.
I'm not gonna, force anybody to. I can do a little bit of persuading, and I do, but I certainly don't worry if somebody doesn't do it. But this has been the gospel read on Holy Thursday for years, for a long time. And with no foot washing, they did do some of the foot washing in kind of the Middle Ages. It wasn't brand new when we did it. It was brought back into the worship. And partly practicality, I assume. That's why the Pope has 12 people. If he washed all the feet of all the people who were there at the service, it would take years. Yeah, that's kind of where it is. And so when we have on this night the commemoration of the first Eucharist, we actually hear the story of the Eucharist in the Eucharistic prayer itself, as opposed to as part of the gospel. Okay. All right, let's go back to our screen. Because, of course, that made me say, we need to look at, the account of the Last Supper itself. So this time I'm going to use the account as in Luke. Mark, Matthew, and Luke all have accounts of it. And Paul actually, in a few places, talks about that's where the words of institution. This is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me. But picking one, I thought we'd use this since it's a Luke year. Now, the festival of unleavened bread, which is called the Passover, was near. The chief priests and the scribes were looking for a way to put Jesus to death, for they were afraid of the people. Then Satan entered into Judas, called Iscariot, who was one of the 12. He went away and conferred with the chief priests and officers of the temple police about how he might betray him to them. They were greatly pleased and agreed to give him money. So he consented and began to look for an opportunity to betray him to them when no crowd was present. Then came the day of unleavened bread on which the Passover lamb had to be sacrificed. So Jesus sent Peter and John, saying, "Go and prepare the Passover meal for us so that we may eat it." They asked him, "Where do you want us to make preparations for it?" "Listen," he said to them, "when you have entered the city, a man carrying a jar of water will meet you. Follow him into the house he enters and say to the owner of the house, 'The teacher asks you, where is the guest room where I may eat the Passover with my disciples?' He will show you a large room upstairs already furnished. Make preparations for us there." So they went and found everything as he had told them, and they prepared the Passover meal. One of the things I think is interesting here is the parallel with Palm Sunday. Go and you'll see this cult tied up there. If anyone asks you why you're taking it, say the Lord needs it. Again, this is go and find the man with the jar of water, go into that place he enters and tell the owner to set up the guest room. So there's a lot of Jesus kind of in this last week of his life being the one to direct how things will happen. So then the hour came. When the hour came, he took his place at the table, and the apostles with him. He said to them, "I have eagerly desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer. For I tell you, I will not eat it until it is fulfilled in the kingdom of God." Then he took a cup, and after giving thanks, he said, "Take this and divide it amongst yourselves. For I tell you that from now on I will not drink the fruit of the vine until the kingdom of God comes." Then he took a loaf of bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and gave it to them, saying, "This is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me." And he did the same with the cup of, lost my place. And he did the same with the cup after supper, saying, "This cup that is poured out for you is the new covenant in my blood. But see, the one who betrays me is with me, and his hand on the table." Hold on, I'm sorry. Cat. There we go. "For the Son of Man is going as it has been determined, but woe to that one by whom he is betrayed." Then they began to ask one another which of them it could be who would do this. And later Jesus says to them, "You are those who have stood by me in my trials, and I confer on you, just as my Father has conferred on me, a kingdom, so that you may eat and drink at my table in my kingdom, and you will sit on thrones judging the 12 tribes of Israel. Simon, Simon, listen. Satan has demanded to sift all of you like wheat, but I have prayed for you that your own faith may not fail. And you, when once you have turned back, strengthen your brothers. And he said to him, Lord, I am ready to go with you to prison and to death. Jesus said, I tell you, Peter, the cock will not crow this day until you have denied 3 times that you know me. So let's talk a bit about what we're looking at in terms of the geography. Remember the place. So when Jesus sends Peter and John to go to get the upper room, they're probably staying over here around Bethany, which is where Jesus has been. It's possible they were somewhere over here, but likely they were up here. And so they went into the city gates and they went into the upper room. This is where it is now commemorated to be. This may not be where it was, but this is the place where for, 1,500 years at least, where there's been a church that is that says it is the place where the Last Supper happened. And then it says that Jesus then goes out with the disciples and goes up to Gethsemane and says, stay awake with me as he goes off to pray. So again, we'll see Jesus coming down this mountain and up into the city and then going back up the mountain. I think it is so interesting, and I didn't understand this at all until I was there, that these are not small distances and they're not easy walks. It's hard now with roads and cars, but he is moving all the time in and out of Jerusalem. Part of this may be because, he wanted to stay with his friends where he was accustomed to being. Maybe he was staying up the Mount of Olives because he knew the more time he spent in the city, the more likely that those who wanted to kill him or convict him would have easier access. Remember when he came into the city in triumphal entry, he does go in the 3 synoptic gospels in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. He goes in and he throws over the tables of the moneylenders. So this is that same week. He's not keeping a low profile, and it may be that he's going up and down the mountain. Remember, up mountain is closer to God. That's where Moses got the 10 Commandments and was with God. That is where throughout the gospel, Jesus is going up to a mountain. That's where the transfiguration happens. And so this is the here around the Kidron Valley. You have both the high places, the mountaintop places, and then the steep depths, and then back into this area, which was in a way the dangerous place for him to be. Any questions? Since I don't see you all, Emma. Okay.
Well, I have one question.
Yes, ma'am.
If Peter's denial takes place back in the city, right outside where the upper room is, I thought his denial took place when Jesus was arrested.
Yeah. So that's a really good question. So you see, they go from the upper room up to the Garden of the Gethsemane. It's there that Judas leads the soldiers and they come to arrest Jesus up here. And then they take him back down here, and you see this high priest Caiaphas's house.
Uh-huh.
So that is where he is led to be convicted by the the Jewish leaders. And so he's taken to the high priest, Caiaphas. And so that's actually why Peter's denial happens near the same place as the upper room.
Gotcha.
Good question. Hello, Bellatrix. Sorry. All right. So let's talk about the upper room. It's also called Mount Zion. This site has been very important for a long time. It is said that David's tomb is underneath here. That is where it's always been commemorated, and there is, a place underneath it. But it's not where David was buried. We don't know, but that was where it was commemorated. And so here Jesus comes for the Last Supper, which is symbolic in terms of where David's tomb also was. Also, it is symbolic in that it is so close to Caiaphas. It is so close to the place where he is in the greatest danger. So here, as you go into it, it is there is both a church and there's kind of a lower cave. And you'll see here, you can tell all the tourist group, like this group all had to wear yellow hats to show that they were, to find the groups. This other one had hats too. This is an unusual church space. It's really not. There is an altar, but it is not not as impressive as some, and it's surprising to me when we went. It was filled with people. There are no chairs, pews, nothing. But there's a lot of symbolism, and one of the most important ones is this. This is the pelican. So pelicans are have long been considered a Christian symbol, and you will often see. Actually, at my seminary, I should have put a picture in of it. There is a mosaic of a pelican, and she is plucking out her pin feathers, and her babies are reaching in to drink the blood. And it was said that when mother pelicans had a hard time, they didn't have the ability to feed their children, that they would feed them their own blood. And so, of course, that is a symbol very much associated with us partaking of Christ's blood, of us being fed with the body and blood of Christ. So, like here, you can see this relief, and it's the pelican and the two babies, although they're kind of the same size. But that's why you have a symbol like that there, because it represents the Eucharist for that. And then, so I thought I had another picture, but I don't. So that's fine. So let's talk about Egeria and what she said they were doing in those early days. Remember that, as I've said before, but it should bear repeating, is that there were places that likely in Jerusalem would have been remembered, but there wouldn't have been churches or anything there. They wouldn't have preserved any of it. It was illegal, for one thing, to be a Christian through much of the first 300 years. And so they didn't really have permanent places, and nobody thought to save the true cross like Helena wanted to find. But by the time, and that's in 330 or so, that Empress Helena is leading the work in Jerusalem to kind of come up with the relics that are still there to build churches, and the leadership of the empire in Constantinople was really the one who kind of had this area. And so Egeria, when she went, would have been still in the first 50 years, 60 years maybe, since all this began, but it was very zealous. So this church obviously is not the one that stood there, but this is likely near where She is places her accounts, but we can't know for sure. Mostly it's kind of tradition to, in many cases, to say, okay, this is the place. But is it really? It doesn't matter because this is where it's been commemorated and where we are. So Egeria, for Maundy Thursday, as you remember they all follow the bishop down the Mount of Olives into the city of Jerusalem, and they go to the Anastasis. They go to the Martyrium, the place of Golgotha, and then go back up the mountain. So here for Maundy Thursday, she's beginning these three final days. They did have prayers and hymns and everything in between, but really we'll pick up with her here at the Maundy Thursday. She says, at the 8th hour, all the people gather at the martyrium according to custom, but earlier than on other days because it is necessary for the dismissal to be done sooner. I'm just going to get out of the slideshow quickly so I can. All right, so oh, sorry, that took me out of it. I just want to go back to the map for a second. So let's go back up to the map. Slideshow from here. All right. So she says they start at the site of the crucifixion. So here, Golgotha. This is where the church, the Holy Sepulchre, which has both Golgotha and the tomb, the site of both the burial and the resurrection. So they start off here. This is really at the martyrium, the Golgotha, the place of the crucifixion. This is where much of their Holy Week revolves around. So then she's reminding us we're here and we're going to go down to the upper room and go up to the Garden of Gethsemane. So you can see there's a bit of distance, and like everything in Jerusalem, it's all kind of up and down through the old city. There's all these, there would have been even at that time cobblestones and uneven things. And so it's quite a large group going. So just keep that in mind. Sorry, it's going back through. All right. But before the dismissal is done, the archdeacon raises his voice and says, at the first hour of the night, so that's like midnight, let us all come together at the church that is on Eliona, because the greatest labor awaits us today, this very night. So we talked a bit about Eliona before. It is up the Mount of Olives near the top. It's the cave where Jesus often taught and visited with those who came to support him, especially his closest folks. So then everyone hurries to return to their home to eat, because as soon as they have eaten, they all go to Eliona, to the church in which there is a cave, in which on this day the Lord was with the apostles. Those passages also from the gospel are read, in which the Lord addressed the disciples that very day, sitting in the same cave that is in the church. Now, those are two very far off places from one another. And clearly they are doing a bit of movement that it seems like sometimes, let me say this, it seems like sometimes they're throwing in movement that, is counterproductive. There are much simpler ways to go around, but all of it was built on being in the places where these things happened. It was very important to the pilgrims, and it is this is a drive for pilgrims today. It was a drive for me, is to actually be there, to actually walk in the footsteps of Jesus. And so Holy Week, there is so much moving by large crowds following the bishop, but it is part of our faith to want to know Jesus, to be there, to know what it was like for him and for the disciples. So here is underneath that upper room, back to up to Eliona, the cave. This we saw last week. Sorry, we're back up the mountain right now for Eliona. And then from there, at about the 6th hour, they go up with hymns to the Imbomon, to that place where the Lord ascended into heaven. And there again, similarly, readings and hymns and antiphons appropriate to the day are recited. Now, the Ascension is a completely different thing. It's not in Holy Week. However, you may remember it was this tiny little stone structure that wasn't very big. It is a monastery, not a monastery, it is a mosque officially. And there they have the place where they say that's where Jesus' last footsteps were, the last place his feet touched the ground. And outside now there are altars for different denominations, because they can't all share an altar, because they believe other churches are not the reality. So why do they stop there? It's because it's on the way. It's a holy place. It might be that part of it was, no, this isn't he didn't do this, but we can't go by it and not stop and pray. It also could have been practicality. You've got a lot of people, and we're told on the Palm Sunday that they go very slowly, that it could be this is kind of a place to have a moment of prayer, to stop, to kind of let everybody catch up. But they stop at the Imboman, which is this building. Forgot I had a picture of it in here. So the place where Jesus ascension. So that's when the cocks begin to crow. They come down from the Imbomon with hymns and come to that place where the Lord prayed, as is written in the gospel. And he approached a stone's throw and prayed, and the rest. For in that place there is a fine church. The bishop and all the people enter. And that passage from the gospel is read where he said to his disciples, "Watch lest you enter into temptation." Now, this doesn't really tell us about the Last Supper per se, but this is the account of how they did on this day. And from there, with hymns, even down to the smallest child, they come down on foot with the bishop to Gethsemane, where on account of the large size of the crowd, both wearied from the vigil and weak from daily fasting, because they have come down such a large mountain, they come very slowly to Gethsemane, where then 200 church candles are prepared to give light to all the people. So here it's kind of, you find the beginning of the agony in the garden, which I'll show a bit more. And it could be that the church where the upper room is commemorated, that was not there yet, that it wasn't a place that was regularly recognized. It could be that the people in her time, the pilgrims, the bishop, the church, believed that the Last Supper, the events of it, took place up the mountain at the Eliona, this cave where he is, or somewhere up there near where he was staying. That means that, sometimes you just don't know where anything is, and people just pick a place. So this is one thing from Egeria that, you kind of don't immediately go, oh, this is where she, going to Jerusalem did make me go, oh, now I understand where she was talking about. But you do get the sense that they are going all night. They have been walking, when they reach Gethsemane and they read the passage where the Lord is arrested, where the agony in the garden, they have all stopped there. They have stopped in exhaustion. They are probably tired, as the Peter and James and John were. And she said, when the passage has been read, there is such a groaning and moaning from all the people with weeping that the lamentation of all the people is heard about as far away as the city. That's pretty far. Now, remember, I have told you that standing in, I don't think I have a picture of it, but standing in the Garden of Gethsemane, you are looking directly across the Kidron Valley to the gate of the temple. You are even with that high temple wall. Remember, the Temple Mount is very high. And so they have come down the mountain after they've come up from the Holy Sepulchre, the place of Golgotha. They've eaten and come up, and now they've worked their way down. And now, after having been praying and hymns, they reach this place and they spend time keeping watch with the Lord. These are some photographs from the Garden of Gethsemane, all the olive trees. The irony is that you cannot go into the garden at all. You can only look. And that is because pilgrims would come and they would tear pieces of bark off the trees. They were so incredibly, they wanted to be able to have a piece of it for themselves. So in our time, you can't go near them at all, but beautiful gardens. And I come to Gethsemane, even though we're kind of in that place between Monday, Thursday, Good Friday, partly just because we have a lot to cover next week with Good Friday, but because even in our Lord's, in the actual biblical happenings, they would have gone from the upper room, and he takes, they probably go back up to Bethany or wherever that, where they've been staying, but Jesus asked Peter and James and John to go with him. This is the outside of the church there at Gethsemane. And to be honest, I cannot remember all what this fresco is about on the top. It's a big building, huge. And here inside, you see it is just a stunningly beautiful church. But you have at the center here Jesus in agony, and that is the main site of it. You look up in the dome, you can see so much, but if you look around the edges, you see the mosaics have the olive branches. It kind of surrounds much of this area. It's kind of everywhere for it. And so, like Egeria, pilgrims today would come to the place where the Lord's agony happened. This is perhaps one of the most moving moments in the gospel account of the passion and death and resurrection, in the sense that it is the time where we see Jesus at his most vulnerable. He says, stay awake with me, because the flesh, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. That he goes and he prays to God. If there's some other way, let this cup pass from me, but not my will, but your will. And he keeps going back. He goes back 3 times to find the disciples sleeping. They're both exhausted and they're heavy with grief. This has been a big night for them. Remember in the gospel accounts, and when you see Egeria's pilgrimage, when I made my pilgrimage, remember the disciples didn't know. They didn't have hundreds or thousands of years of understanding what had happened. When you think about the night that they had, where they've had this Passover supper, or in the case of John's gospel, the evening before the Passover, that they have been to this supper, washing of the feet, only happens in John, but let's say that happens. And they have this meal, and at it, Jesus says, this is that's bread, that's my body. He breaks it and gives it to them. And then he says, this cup is my blood, and drink of it whenever you gather. And that's a lot. It's a lot to think about for them. A lot of times the disciples have no idea what Jesus is talking about. We see that over and over and over again, this heavy symbolism, and they don't really know what's about to happen. They know they're in danger. That's why Peter says, I will go with you to prison and to be killed. They all know that the time is coming that the law is going to catch up with him. In essence, those who want to get rid of him because he is a threat to the uh, the the authorities of his own community, and then a threat to the larger Roman oppressors. So at it, it's a very strange time, and Jesus tells them that one of you will betray me, and sitting at the table. And, all of that has to have been hard for the disciples. And if Jesus goes off and he literally like sweats blood and cries and asks for this to pass from him, that he knows what's going to happen. He knows he's going to be betrayed. Um, and in this moment, it all kind of catches up with them all. Jesus is there in agony, praying, trying to see if there's any other way to do this. There are Peter and James and John who've been through a lot, who are exhausted. Jesus is off praying, and quiet, dark night. There was no church there. They're just in the garden. Um, so I think it's really important that Egeria and the pilgrims stop here, and they have their time of grief. That is what it would have been like for all of the disciples and for Jesus. Comments or questions on that? I did a lot of talking at you. And went back to see if I see your faces. So here you'll see on the apse of this wall, there is this mosaic of Jesus there praying in the garden. You see some olive trees. You see the spirit. It's kind of like a dove or human, and then up here is kind of this represents God the Father. I don't have a picture of them up close here, but this is, of course, a mosaic on one side of Judas Iscariot kissing Jesus, the sign of betrayal. The man I will kiss is the man. And then over here, you can't quite see it. It is the arrest. And you can see in the background this guy holding up like a weapon, it looks like. It's a torch. And so this is a much more kind of the violent moment. And it may have the cut off the ear, but I can't remember. But you get the idea of what's commemorated there. So you see up into the dome, and then as you come in and out of the main part of the church, this is what you see. It is the thorns, the vines, it is the garden, it is blood. It doesn't seem like the same place, does it? But if you're looking up at this apse and you turn around, this is what you're looking at. And it's really profound. And for the people of Egeria's time, for pilgrims today, this is not a place that you come in and leave immediately. Some churches, and to be honest, the upper room, you go in and you leave. There's not a lot there. Here, you can spend hours and hours of time reflecting and praying, and feeling our Lord's agony. But also, here, I do have a thing of that. So there's the one side, which is of Judas kissing Jesus. I don't have the other side, but so let's talk about what Egeria said again. From that hour, they go to the city on foot with hymns. They arrive at the gate at that time when one person begins to recognize another, i.e., daybreak. It's the light is finally starting to come back at the end of the evening and the early hours of dawn. From there, right through the middle of the city, all as one, older and younger, rich and poor, all are ready there. Especially on that day, no one withdraws from the vigil until morning. Thus, the bishop is led from Gethsemane as far as the gate, and from there through the whole city as far as the cross, back to the martyrium. So Gethsemane is such a powerful place, and it is, for me, the thing that struck me the most. I'm sorry, I didn't put it in the slide apparently, is the vision of knowing, when you're there at the front of this church, there is just in front of you the Kidron Valley, and then directly across to the tomb. So when Jesus is praying, the temple rather. So he's looking at the temple. He knows that that's where he'll be taken. When he is praying in agony, he could look and look right at the temple, this symbol of the authorities that are trying to protect themselves from, that they don't want him to in any way take away from what has been built there. So underneath there is a chapel dug into the rock. And you see here the entrance into Gethsemane. And there you have an altar, and you have Jesus there speaking. But what you really notice is underneath at this altar, on one side, you have a disciple sleeping, and on the other side, you have a disciple sleeping. This is right under the place where the altar is up above, and it is so stark to go and to see them there, resting up against the altar. So, foot washing, not mentioned by Egeria at all. It was practiced early on in the apostolic times, and then at various points through Christian history. Certainly in the early church, it would have been practiced because usually you were in the home of someone, and there it would have been practiced not just in commemoration, but as part of what happened when you went into a home, when they all came together for worship. It was always associated with Holy Thursday or Maundy Thursday. And it finally became a part of the Holy Thursday liturgy in the Middle Ages. So that's really where it appeared. It likely disappeared for us kind of after Henry VIII, after Elizabeth. Henry VIII, just robbed every, wanted all the stuff down, tore apart the monasteries, and really it was because he needed money. And it was always kept very simple for a long time. And it may have been that the foot washing would have been kind of papish, or popish. That was something that was to be avoided. So sometimes too much ritual behavior would be not appropriate. But foot washing is not brand new in the 80s. It's just when the church began to really say, we as a church started going, this is important. We read this. Jesus says, do this as I have done to you, do to one another. I know Andy will share with me the beautiful hymn that we sing usually during it, which is kneels at the feet of his friends, silently washes. I can't get the tune. Got that. Kneels at the feet of his friends, silently washes their feet, Master who acts as a slave to them. Yesu, Yesu, fill us with your love. Show us how to serve the neighbor we have in you. So it is a hymn that we always sing. It is about the foot washing itself. So Maundy Thursday today, one thing that churches will sometimes have is an agape meal. In the early church, like in, from the time the apostles are in the Acts of the Apostles, those things are happening. Certainly Paul, who's writing actually some of his letters around 50s, before any of the Gospels are written down. Paul talks about, how they are when they gather together for the common meal. They didn't call it communion or Eucharist, really, although the Greek word probably would have been, it just means Thanksgiving. But it was an agape meal, and agape is one of the many Greek words for love, and it is the completely unconditional, total love. It's the love of God for us. It's the love of Jesus for us, and it's the love we are called to share with each other. And it would have been not simply bread and wine the way we do in church. It would have been an actual meal. And Paul says, "Hey, y'all, right now, everybody brings their food, and the people who are wealthy and have the best, they sit on one end of the table, and the poor have to sit on the other end. And the rich eat the rich food, and the poor eat the poor food." And he says, that's not how this works. And so an agape meal was the very earliest form of the Eucharist. And so it is a practice that has been around for centuries and centuries, but many churches will have an agape meal as part of their Maundy Thursday commemoration. So they might have this as a meal before the Eucharist or after, usually before, or because just of practicalities, because you want to strip the altar after. You can't strip the altar and then go eat a lovely dinner. Now, there are places where they have what they call a Christian Seder, and they do it as a Seder meal, a Passover meal. With I've been at a church where they had all the booklets where they used to use for their Passover, their Seder, on Maundy Thursday, and that is absolutely completely inappropriate, and it's something that really is not done, and has there's been a lot of work to try to say to people, no, that's doing a Seder without, first of all, any Jewish people there leading it, having a Seder on this night. The While the Gospels tell us it's a Passover meal, what we hear now is not the story of Jesus keeping the Passover. We hear about what he is doing in himself. And so it is, the word we use kind of lately is cultural appropriation, but it's just very disrespectful. And so what is more appropriate is the Christian meal, which is an agape meal. So that is something nowadays that has been controversial, because some places do it, they've done it for years, they love it, but more and more the teaching is that that's inappropriate. You can have an agape meal, have a lovely meal, but it's not a Passover Seder that you're doing. And so you have the Eucharist. Obviously, it's the Last Supper. This is my body, this is my blood, even though in the Maundy Thursday service, we don't hear that except for the Eucharistic prayer. But the Eucharist is essential. That's his last meal with his apostles, his disciples, before he is killed, when he says, "I will not again drink the fruit of the vine until I come into my kingdom." This is his last meal. This is his last time with them. He spent so much of his ministry, throughout you see Jesus is at meals. He's sitting with people. He gets in trouble because he's eating with the wrong people. He's getting in trouble because, he's eating with tax collectors and sinners, and he gets in trouble because, lots of people are wondering about it, but he also feeds 5,000 people, plus women and children, with 5 loaves and 2 fish. In fact, in Mark's gospel, he feeds 5,000 and then later also feeds 4,000, plus women and children. In John's gospel, his first miracle is in a wedding, at a wedding banquet, and he turns water into wine. So this last part of Jesus' ministry with them before his arrest, being a meal, is hugely important. And it is the day most appropriate to say this was where we commemorate that first Eucharist, in the sense that Jesus gave it to us, and ever since Christians have been doing the same. Foot washing, in parentheses, it's right after the sermon. I like to think that it's after the sermon because it gives the priest a chance to kind of talk people into doing it. But certainly after the gospel and the sermon is when you would do it. And then we want to talk about the reservation of the sacrament for Good Friday at the altar of repose. What happened at the end of the meal? I mean, the service. I'm sorry, I went back the wrong way. So, one of the most powerful moments of Maundy Thursday to me is that at the end of the Eucharist, when we have said the post-communion prayer, the lights usually dim and everything at the altar is stripped. And usually, as Andy knows, when we sing Pange Lingua, now my tongue, it is you go from kind of this foot washing and almost the normality of the Eucharist, and then you begin to take it away. This visual representation of how Jesus is being drained of his life in a way. So when you do this, you strip everything. The kneelers, you strip books, especially ones that are visible. You strip any candles, any crosses. You take anything that is not like solidly there, like our pray dues would stay there, but everything else is taken away. And at the end, the fair linen, which is the important linen that goes across the altar, a white linen, that is then folded. And usually the altar is then washed traditionally by the priest. And then usually at that point, all light is only light on the cross. The altar is now bare. When that happens, you no longer reverence the altar. Jesus is not there. Jesus is already, in a way, arrested, and he's moving on. And from that point on until the great vigil of Easter, you do not reverence the altar. What you do, though, is in preparation for Good Friday, is you want the Eucharist. Many of us want it that day, but you may not, under any circumstance, celebrate the Eucharist on Good Friday. You may not. But what you may do is consecrate enough. Is that my mom? Is that me?
Sorry.
We often have the same ringtone, and so that's my ringtone too. So I'm like, Harry Potter. It's like my phone's ringing. So what you do is you take the bread and the wine that's been blessed, and you take it out of the church and you take it to the altar of repose. So for us, it's the chapel. We do have a separate chapel, so it is a separate place, but sometimes it's another place. Sometimes the chapel's right next to it, but you move it there. Sometimes you just put it in the back of the church or in the narthex, wherever you do. there you represent the garden. So usually by this point there are now flowers. There's not been any flowers on the altar since Lent started, but now you have the flowers. It represents the Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. You make a garden, and there the body and blood, the body of Christ, the presence of Christ is there in the midst of the garden, and we are asked to keep watch with him. Could you not wait with me 1 hour? And so we try from then on to never leave Jesus alone, to always have somebody be right there. And so here we usually have a 1 hour watch, and we will do that. And I encourage you to sign up. I know, Alexa, you do kind of early-ish morning, usually.
No, I usually do around 2 o'clock.
Oh, okay. Has anybody else done a middle of the night watch? Yeah. What was that like for you, Andy? Sorry, I know, I don't want to interrupt the class.
I'll talk quietly. I actually like it. It's a great time for quiet and reflection. And I actually do enjoy it. And it seems kind of perverse to get up in the middle of the night or stay awake until 3 o'clock. But I really do enjoy it. It's very meaningful for me.
And so when that goes into the altar of repose, Jesus is no longer in the church, but he's there in the garden. And then for Good Friday, that sacrament is then brought into the church at the end of the service. Communion is given, and then all of that bread and wine, any consecrated bread and wine, must be consumed or appropriately taken care of. So the wine needs to be, I usually prefer it not to go in the piscina on Good Friday, to go down. Usually we've got lots of people I've delegated to come and help, to eat the bread as we consume it. You usually don't keep any in reserve at all. Like if somebody should have a sudden illness and you needed to take it, there are dispensations that I could probably do something with them that day. But Jesus is gone. He is utterly gone, not even present with us in the form of the sacrament. So to me, that moment between, from the stripping of the altar through the night to Good Friday, that is a very sacred time. And this 3 holy days, the Holy Triduum, starting with that Maundy Thursday evening, all of this time for Egeria and for pilgrims today, this is all taken up with commemorating, with understanding, with reading, with meditating, with singing or prayers, this understanding that we are at a point where Jesus' life will be done, and the resurrection not yet with us. So next week, we're going to talk a bit about Good Friday and what would happen, especially under Egeria. I know for me that looking at her pilgrimage, which I knew, we studied it when I was in college, in seminary, and just powerful, but it meant so much to me to be walking those places and to be going, oh my gosh, so to see it from her perspective, to see it from Jesus' perspective, is very powerful. But here we do it through our actions. We do it through the foot washing. We do it through the celebrating the Eucharist. We do it with Jesus being moved to the garden and praying with him. We do it by the stripping of the altar. And so while we're not going to walk in the footsteps of Jesus or be in these places, we are still very much a part of the story. And I hope that you've gotten you're getting a better understanding of kind of what it was like, because I think, we just kind of see it as scenes in the movie, but when you kind of see the places, you begin to understand that this was really very physical and exhausting. All right. Thank you so much. I went a little long. My apologies, but any final comments, or anybody want to say anything before you go?
No, Leslie, I just want to say thank you so much. I learned so much tonight.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. I love to talk about it because it's something that means so much to me. And I really do believe that to truly appreciate Easter Sunday, we need to keep, as much as it is possible, Palm Sunday, but then also to be there in prayer during the week, to Maundy Thursday, Good Friday. All of these things make the meaning of Easter. Otherwise, it's just kind of, oh, look, hey, bunnies and eggs. And we just kind of showed up, and we have the great hymns. We have Jesus Christ is risen today and Welcome Happy Morning. But the resurrection has its true understanding when you also are holding it very closely with the passion and death of Jesus. So thank you for listening to me geek out and enjoy this. And next week, we are last one. So I will see you then. Hope you join me. Thank you all. Bye. Bye, Mom.